Hi everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. I'm going to be speaking to you today about the first half of June and the full moon that we have in Sagittarius coming up on the 14th. Now, we are still within very intense energy. It doesn't need an astrologer to tell you that. We can feel it everywhere because we're still well within the influence of those very powerful eclipses, and the full moon is powerful in itself, as I will go on to describe. So, as backdrop, before we get into looking at the full moon specifically, Jupiter moved into Aries on the 10th of May. It will stay in Aries until the 28th of October. And it only visits this sign once every 12 years. It has a 12-year orbit. And it's being energized further by Mars now in its own warrior sign of Aries. And they became exactly conjunct on the 29th of May. But they will stay conjunct for the first week of June operationally. So Mars is energizing Jupiter, and Jupiter is expanding Mars. But beyond that, Mars is also what is called out of bounds. And what that means is that normally planets orbit within a 23 degrees north or south of the ecliptic zone, but occasionally planets stray beyond that. And when they stray beyond that, they are categorized as out of bounds. And it brings in a sort of rather out of control aspect to the planetary symbolism. So remember, Aries energy is extremely assertive, aggressive even. It's warrior energy. So we may see more of this in the world, but if we use this personally, it can be so positive for us to have courage, to take a risk, to be daring, to be brave, and to be a pioneer, to be a leader in your own life. And it's fresh energy. It's the first sign of the zodiac. So there's this feeling of fresh forward movement with this. So if you see where Aries falls, in which house it falls in your chart, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website. Go to this link, it's actually below in the description, and you can buy a 2-part video series that will explain from zero how you find these points in your chart and what it means for you with every update I do. Now, so Mars can energize the future vision. It's very expansive, the future vision for us, both individually and collectively. So it is very optimistic, it's very forward-looking in that way. So we're going to feel this for the first week of June. It's also about fighting for causes. It's a crusading energy, fighting Mars, particularly your beliefs around freedom, truth, and justice. Jupiter represents all of those things. Freedom, truth, and justice. And Jupiter is also the ruler of the full moon in Sagittarius that I'll be talking about in a moment. So the other kind of moving forwards energy is Uranus is now moving on to degrees where it hasn't been for about 84 years, because Uranus has an 84-year orbit. So it's now moving on to 16, 17 degrees of Taurus. So if you have anything round about 16, 17 degrees of the fixed signs, and they are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, then you may be feeling this. Principally look at where Taurus falls in your chart, which house area. But if you have a planet or an angle that's at those degrees I've just mentioned in any of those fixed signs, there may be a restlessness, a kind of revving up, want more freedom, want more independence. There's an urge to break away from any constriction or constraint. You want to bring more variety into your life, particularly anything which has become stale or repetitive or deadening in your life. Uranus will shake it up. And it's really good to do that consciously yourself, because if we don't create the change ourselves in our lives, the change tends to come much less comfortably from the outside. But Uranus also, moving on to these new degrees, is creating this sense of momentum and a fresh new episode in life. Other details before we get into the full moon are that on the 3rd of the month, Mercury moves stationary direct. It's been retrograde by this time for 3 weeks. It moves stationary direct at 26 degrees and 5 minutes of Taurus. That is pretty much exactly conjunct the fixed star Algol at 26 degrees, 10 minutes of Taurus. And I talked about Algol a lot last time. Algol has the rather unsavory symbolism of decapitation. So this can be about people losing their heads emotionally, but it's also about countries losing their heads, losing their leaders. And for instance, we've recently seen this in Australia. Scott Morrison was voted out in the recent election. That is a loss of the previous leader, as it were. And I also understand in Sri Lanka, there has been full-blown revolution that may have taken out the government. It's hard to get information about that right now, but there may be others that happen around this time because of new information. Mercury is to do with new facts, new information coming to light, and it is pretty much exactly, or certainly exactly by degree, Algol. Not only that, but Mercury is re-energizing, reactivating the total lunar eclipse degree, because that total lunar eclipse on the 15th, 16th of May was at 25 of Scorpio, which means that that's where the moon was. The sun was at 25 degrees of Taurus, which is within 1 degree of where Mercury now sits. So Mercury could be bringing up again some of the themes of that total lunar eclipse. So I'll put the link for that video below, because boy, was that a incredibly powerful lunar eclipse that's still rippling on in our energy fields. So that's on the 3rd of the month. On the 4th of the month, Saturn moves stationary retrograde. So they're moving in different directions now. But just to say before I get into that, that they are in square. They're not only changing direction pretty much at the same time, but they are also in square, because Saturn is at 25 of Aquarius, Mercury is at 26 of Taurus. So this is bringing up again those very strong issues around censorship. And I think they potentially could get even stronger at this time, or potentially stronger at this time. So be aware of that. But it also means new social media platforms will be being birthed as well. Now, Saturn will move retrograde until the 22nd of October, when it'll move back to 18 degrees of Aquarius. That's important. October is a very important month because there's several changes of direction of planets, and also in October, because Saturn will have retrograded back to 18 degrees, of Aquarius, and Uranus at that time will be 18 degrees of Taurus. They come back, Saturn and Uranus, back into an exact square by degree, not by degree in minute, but by degree. Now that square was running all through 2021, all through this year, although it's taken a bit of a gap through the middle months, the summer months in the Northern Hemisphere. Remember the big themes I've talked about, you can find them in previous videos, of the past versus the future, but principally control versus freedom. That's going to come up big time as another peak in October, I feel. When planets move retrograde, they have a more introspective quality. So with Saturn moving retrograde until the 22nd of October, we could be going back over, thinking back over aspects of control in society, how they have been used, because Saturn is very much about control, the rules, the regulations, and whether those rules and regulations have been appropriate from where we stand, whether we want to make our own rules and regulations or have any rules and regulations at all. What is for our highest good? Is there a sense of stepping more fully into our own power and our own sovereignty at this time? We may also be reviewing friendships and networks, social networks, Aquarius, at this time too, although many of us have already done that. So remember, retrograde periods are always more introspective. We're going back over the principle of whatever the symbolism of that planet represents. And in this case, Saturn, control, rules, regulations used in society, Aquarius. So those are in the first few days of the month. But as I say, that the retrograde will go on all the way through till October. Then we have Venus in its own sign of Taurus now, that is coming to exactly conjunct Uranus on the 11th of the month at 16 degrees of Taurus. See where 16 degrees of Taurus falls in your chart, because if you want a relationship and you're not currently in a relationship and that falls in your 5th or your 7th houses in your birth chart, that could bring an out of the blue sudden relationship in for you. If you have that in your 5th or 7th house and you are in a relationship, you or your partner may have a greater urge for freedom and independence. That is, this too will pass because Venus moves on fairly quickly, but there may be that sense of, I want more freedom, I want more independence, I want more space coming up. Venus and Uranus are both conjunct the North Node at 20 degrees of Taurus. So this may bring up new developments in digital currencies, Venus and Taurus currencies, new digital developments in currencies, or just more digital developments in general. I've been hearing that MasterCard are launching a new biometric system so that in large supermarkets that increasingly you won't be paying with cash or card, you'll be paying with facial recognition. Don't quite know the date of that, but that's the kind of thing that is likely to come up around this time of the full moon. Uranus becomes exactly conjunct to the North Node in the last week of July and the first week of August, and then digital developments will be very prominent indeed around that time, I would say. So let us look at the full moon. Let me share my screen now. Okay, and one of the first things to note here is that this is a supermoon. It isn't just any old full moon, it's a supermoon. And that means that the moon is very close in its orbit to the Earth, and therefore it exerts a much stronger gravitational pull on the tides and the tectonic plates, as well as our psyche. So this could be a time of more seismic activity. I mean, we have that as a backdrop running all the way through till 2026 with Uranus in Taurus, but this is potentially a particular peak because the moon is so close to the Earth. And the areas where this full moon becomes, the geographies where this full moon becomes angular are the western states of North America, Mexico and Argentina, Western Europe, running down through West Africa, and China. So one or more of those geographies may come into prominence at the time of this full supermoon, which is on the 14th of June. It happens at 4:51 a.m. Pacific, and as you will see here, it happens at 12:51 p.m. lunchtime, British summertime in the UK. So as always, I've set this chart for the UK because this is where I live, so ignore the clock face and the houses, and we'll just look at where the planets sit and their aspects to each other. So Sagittarius, as ruled by Jupiter, is very much about the subjects, the issues of freedom, truth, and justice. Freedom, truth, and justice. And truth is an interesting one because one of the strongest aspects at this full moon is that we have Neptune, 25 of Pisces, in a T-square to the sun and the moon here. So pretty tight aspect. Neptune represents things that are not as they seem, can even be deception at times. So in the very bright light of this full moon, I mean, full moons are always times when things can come into the light, particularly because this supermoon is going to be so much bigger. It'll literally look bigger from our perspective and much closer to the Earth. So it's going to be very bright light to reveal any secrets or deceptions at this time. Remember, full moons are always about completion, culmination, closure. So see where this falls in your chart, or things that you weren't aware of before. Of course, that whole issue around secrets is linked to, as I've talked many times before, Pluto moving through the last few degrees of Capricorn, digging up anything which is lacking in integrity and accountability, anything which is corrupt, particularly in top-down structures, institutions, corporations, governments, which have had control over our lives. That's the picture with Pluto moving through those last few degrees of Capricorn. It will have completed its sojourn through Capricorn by December 2024. So these next 2 years are going to be extremely important for Pluto to have completed its job, if you follow my drift here. So one of the aspects I wanted to talk about, kind of linked to secrets, is rather a murky aspect, I have to say, because here we have, it's a point in space, it's not an actual orbital body. I've mentioned in the past, but not very often, it's called Black Moon Lilith, and it actually represents the furthest point in the orbit of the moon from the Earth. It's the apogee of the moon, but I don't want to get into the technicalities because we'll really get lost in the weeds with this. But nevertheless, Black Moon Lilith here we see is at 1 degree of Cancer, 133 of Cancer. Remember that the 0 degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, within 2 degrees either side of that, that is the world axis. And what that means, if you have any planets or points on the world axis, then there is potential for that issue, that symbolism, to come onto the public stage in a bigger way. So I'm going to talk about the symbolism of Black Moon Lilith in a moment. It's pretty grisly, I have to say. It's in Cancer, which is the sign of motherhood and therefore pregnancy, babies, etc. It is in fairly tight square to Jupiter. Jupiter expands anything it touches. So Jupiter is expanding the symbolism of Black Moon Lilith, which is on the world axis. Now, Black Moon Lilith is a dark, wild, instinctive, feminine energy. In myth, in the Jewish myth, it was said that she was the first wife of Adam, but because she is a very fierce and very uncompromising energy, she would not, quote, submit to Adam. And as a result, it is said in the myth that she was thrown out of the Garden of Eden. And as punishment, she had to watch many of her children be killed, it is said. And as revenge for that, she, it is said, started to attack pregnant women, and that resulted in stillbirth, etc. So it's a pretty, this is dark stuff. And it's interesting that this full moon is almost exactly opposing the Mars of the US chart. Their Mars is at 21 of Gemini, which rules the 5th house of children. So the US is pulled into this picture by this full moon. Now, this is very obviously, I think, coming onto the public stage as the whole abortion debate in America, Roe versus Wade, that brings about so many, very understandably strong emotions. But this is about the deepest, darkest secrets of society, really. Deepest, darkest secrets of society that nobody really wants to look at because they're so intense emotionally, but even beyond the abortion debate. I hope you can follow what I'm saying here. But it's fierce energy. It is raw, uncompromising, feminine energy. It is very, absolutely uncompromising, as you can understand from the myth, because she wouldn't submit to Adam. Equally, as I've mentioned in the past a couple of times, Black Moon Lilith is quite similar in her symbolism to Eris. Eris here, almost at 25 of Aries, and Eris has been in a very long-running square, which I've talked about many, many, many times, to Pluto. And this square is actually becoming tighter again because Pluto is now moving retrograde, so it's moving kind of backwards through the degrees, so it's becoming tighter in this square from 28 to Capricorn to 25, essentially, of Aries. So I've talked about many times, Eris is also this raw, uncompromising, feminine energy. This goddess of chaos and discord that is also the patron saint of chaotic creation. So doesn't care about creating chaos, in order that everybody in society is recognized, everybody in society is heard. So she will take to the streets, so hence lots of riots, demonstrations, protests, running up against, in this square, the top-down control and rules and regulations of governments. We've seen that so clearly through 2020, 2021. This will continue again, interestingly, till October 2022. There's some parallels here, certainly between Eris and Black Moon Lilith. They both abide by natural law, but not man-made law. And I think that is very interesting as well, considering where we are in society. However, that dark, murky stuff has also, within this chart, has some really beautiful, beautiful energy. And here I'm looking at the moon itself in this full supermoon being conjunct a dwarf planet called Vada at 25 of Sagittarius, and the galactic center at 26 of Sagittarius. Now, the galactic center I've mentioned many times. This is where really our raw plasma, if you like, with which we create our realities, our earth, that's where it comes from. And so this is a creation point. And what is beautiful is in this triple conjunction, Vada, dwarf planet in myth, is known as the Star Lady. And again, I'm referencing Kelly Hunter's research here, the wonderful US astrologer. I'll put her link for her website below as well. But in myth, Vada was the wife of Manwe that I talked about in the last video. Manwe is on the world axis, 1 degree of Aries, 1st degree of the zodiac. And together they created the universe. They created the cosmos. So Manwe, as I mentioned last time, was connected to the Buddha mind, the breath of God. And Vada is the Star Lady who, it is said in myth, placed the sun and the moon and the stars in the sky and set them on their course. So we have this beautiful sense of world renewal happening here. It's a beautiful sense of world renewal, new earth. And although I haven't put her in because I don't talk about her every time because it's such a long-running aspect, Homer, who I've talked about many times, is actually in the very late degrees of Libra, squaring Pluto and opposing Eris. So with the collapse of the old dark world, which is just going to be ongoing for the next couple of years, we have all of this promise of the new earth being birthed, all of this promise of the new earth being birthed. And that is coming from Manwe. Go back to the previous video where I talked about the symbolism of Manwe. Vada, incredible regenerative creative energy, and of course Homer, who could birth babies from all over her body, incredible regenerative energy. So see this full supermoon again as showing up the dark but also the light. And that is, you know, what I think is so exciting. It isn't all about the dark. And yes, there's so much dark being shown in our world because the light is so bright. And remember, this is always two ends of a stick. We can focus on the end of the stick related to fear. And when you do that, it's really hard to feel love. Or we can focus on the love end when it's very hard to feel fear. There are two opposite ends of the emotional and energetic spectrum. And yes, there is a fearful timeline for sure. That's as clear as day. It doesn't have to be your timeline. There are multiple timelines. I know which end of the stick I'm going to focus on. And if I might just suggest that I've talked about some very simple breathing exercises in the past, and I'd just like to mention those again because with all that's happening in the world, it is so useful to have something in your toolkit which is free, available to everyone. You don't have to go on a course, pay money, nothing, and you can do it anywhere, anytime, which is just to drop into your heart in your breath. So shut your eyes and just imagine that you're breathing in and out through your heart as if your heart were your lungs. And you're focused entirely on the breath. And just let the breath breathe you. And gradually, and do this very softly, there's no pushing, forcing, you'll gradually find that the breath should start to deepen and slow. And if you can then just pause momentarily, particularly at the end of the exhale, and you'll drop a little further. And just keep that going for a minute or two, and then maybe extend that pause a little further after the exhale. And you just should keep dropping into bliss. Just focus on that breath. And you can strengthen this further by imagining that you just have a feeling of peace and release, or you could feel love for a partner, a child, a pet, a tree, a place in nature, or gratitude or appreciation. Just try and feel one of those positive aspects, because when you do, you are building your heart field. Your heart field is strengthening, it's expanding, it's becoming more coherent. When we can get into this state of what the HeartMath Institute has done a huge amount of work on this, and the breath I'm describing is very similar to what they talk about in their coherence breath, all of your body systems become more coherent, which is incredibly healthy for your body. Your heart-brain coherence becomes stronger, which improves your memory, your cognitive function. And if you can gradually add yet one more thing into that breath, which is to imagine that you're breathing in sparkly white diamond light, brilliant cleansing sparkly white diamond light into your heart. This has a beautiful elevating effect on your frequency. It drops you into peace, it drops you into bliss. And if you can do this just for 2 or 3 minutes, but several times a day as a part of your daily routine, this will more and more become a default practice for you. It will become your set point of frequency. And that has massive benefits to everything: your own health, your own cognitive function, your interactions with people. And if I can also suggest, this phrase just came to me today, that not only see your heart as your lungs, but perhaps see your heart as your eyes. So you see everything. I'm feeling quite emotional now. You see everything in your world through the eyes of your heart. Everything in your world through your eyes, the eyes of your heart. And you will note how relationships, every relationship changes, particularly challenging relationships. Actually, every relationship will change if you can see everything in your world through the eyes of your heart, because that drops us more into compassion. So I hope that's helped you, and really do feel this. This is such a beautiful practice that every single one of us can do. And when we do it, we move from fear, we move from the drama, we move from the panic, we move from all the scary things in the world. We just we create from that state of bliss, love, and peace. Bliss, love, and peace. And we start to see our world through the eyes of the heart. Remember, the heart and love are leading us to that higher timeline of manifestation and new earth. And we can create that. Everybody in the world can do this practice. Everybody. You don't have to be a brainy person, an intellectual person. You don't have to be an anything person. But it brings the scattering of fear back to a one-pointedness. And that one-pointedness is crucial in our toolkit, our mastery, our toolkit for unity consciousness. We have to bring our scattered attention. It's so hard for us to keep one point, but this heart breath will teach you that very, very easily, to hold one point of focus. And that's a really important gift in our spiritual toolkit. This was a little bit longer today. Hope it's been helpful. If you'd like more information about my books, my teaching videos, my long monthly newsletter, just check out my website, pamgregory.com. And we are moving into another, dare I say, powerful second half. The Cancer solstice is super powerful. I'll be doing a separate session on that with David Farrell, shaman, plant medicine expert, and obviously a separate video for the second half of the month too. God bless. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.